I am your king, Clifford Jefferson. I was descended down from Godfrey, the fifth Count of Anjou, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. I am the reincarnation of King Edgar the Peaceful, which we know as Jesus Christ, who ruled back in the time which we call time immemorial. I have on by my side always Archbishop Belmont from the House of Belmont and CA from the House of pardon yourself. Give me a second. It's been a minute. We ain't had you on the screen. Called Judah from the House of Murphy, Brother Murphy. So I apologize for the little elongated in my wind, but good to have him here, as well as all the viewers who's going to be viewing this content in regards to our obligations to fulfilling the wisdom that we're told to know in regards to controlling our vast estate. I'll let the brothers make their entry, and we can get on with this marvelous lesson as part 4 of what these leaders have failed to do in regards to getting us out of hell. So I digress. Archbishop.
Greetings. Once again, brothers and sisters from the Kingdom of England, Empire of Albion. As I, Archbishop Belmont from the Noble House of Belmont. And like the King said, it's a beautiful time, not only for us to be alive, but to be amongst our brothers up here on the King's bench, to be able to bring this information to the world so that way we can bring our heirs and those who would like to come out of hell out of her. You know, this is not something that you're going to hear every day, because many of our fans or friends, family, whatever we decide to call them today, love to partake in, you know, in the fruits of this world. And they're not realizing that the fruits of this world is actually quite poisonous, especially you don't know where the root of that fruit is coming from. And as we're showing you right now, or going to be showing you, everything that you're getting right now until you come to the proper state of mind, you're getting from the devil, you know. And until you do decide to come back home, nothing that you partake in this world is going to be fruitful for long term. So with that being said, I go ahead and leave the rest of the introduction to Brother Murphy from the Noble House of Murphy, so that way we can go ahead and get on with this beautiful short.
Thank you, Archbishop, and honor, gratitude to the Archbishop and the King for presenting these marvelous lessons throughout the ages. Greetings, kinfolk. We're here back at the King's bench. It's I, your Archbishop Murphy from the Royal House of Murphy. Just wanted to say thank you to my King and my Archbishop for continuing to service you, the people, with this truth. And I'm here to participate as a member of the King's bench and get my lessons. So I trust all is well with everyone out at the sound of my voice. Peace and love.
Well said, bishops. Once again, I am the King, here to give you what was given to me freely. I didn't have to pay a dime for it, you know. So anybody out there charging for information, you got to pay for it. Stop paying. Once again, it's just a pleasure to be able to please my people in the way I love doing is pleasing. You know, we are truly all lords, and to know you're lords, you must remember that time. The time never was when you were not a lord. As you can see on the face of the screen, a diagram. And if you watch the previous lessons that were done in regards to Taj Tariq, listening to Taj Tariq, leader of the Moorish Temple of America, I have a lot of respect for the brother. Like, as I said in the previous video, unfortunately, he's a little bit misguided in regards to his English history. He speaks about it, but vaguely and ambiguously and abstractly, and this becomes the problem. We here at the King's Bench are divinely prepared to do such work in regards to is in our blood, because while we are descendants of who we say we are, and our ancestors descended now from time immemorial. So as you can see, we are at the head of the judiciary as the House of Lords, and our job is to make sure that we resurrect those who are unconscious about who they are as English heirs and raise them from a state of unconsciousness out of what we call in this day and time hell. Spelled H-E-L-L. All right. If you watch the previous podcast, Taj Tariq speaks about the Black law definition for the term hell. So let's go to it right quick. Hold up. What is hell? Law Dictionary, featuring the Black Law Dictionary online, second edition. All right, this ain't the fifth, this is the second edition. All right, what is hell? The name formerly given to a place under the exchequer chamber where the king debtors were confined. Where the king debtors were confined. Richard, this is from the records of Richard the First. Richard the First, descendant of John, descendant of Henry II, descendant of Godfrey, the fifth son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem, which I am the reincarnation of, has declared that the exchequer chamber is above hell, where the debtors are those who do not pay the king's old debt, which we call freeing common sukkahs. Now, go back to video one. If you didn't hear Todd, go to the same definition where I went to, i.e. the Black Law Dictionary, to take it from the abstract understanding to a legal and lawful concrete understanding of hell. Because our process here at the English Stereotypical Church is to bring you out of hell from a legal perspective, from a lawful perspective, that you can see, touch, smell, physically, but you have to open your eyes to see it. So we're going to try to speak as loosely and firmly, well, promise me, phrase it, as firmly and loosely. We want to be firm, but loose at the same time. You know, because we have a lot of those who are out there viewing these lessons aren't able to grasp these concepts quickly, but that's okay, because it took a while for me, as well as my Archbishop, to go into this understanding, which we call intellect. All right, but we're going to try to break it down real slow. So remove yourself from the abstract, the spookyism of what you told hell, or what was predestined for all those who didn't do good. And look at it from a concrete perspective for all those who don't do good in regards to understanding what it is we're trying to tell you. What Taj is trying to tell you, which everybody else is trying to tell you, but don't know how to tell you. All right, so listen up. Black Law Dictionary says hell is a name formerly given to a place under the exchequer chamber where the king's debtors were confined. We have no king in these present day and times. We have no king. We have what we call our president. He's your president-elect. He's head of the United States of America, which prior to that, they were composed of states, which prior to that, they were composed of colonies. So if you watch the videos, you get a good understanding about that. But for the sake of time, we're going to move on. All right. Now, as you scroll down, we go back here. We're going to go back to exchequer chamber. And you see the diagram, you see the House of Lords. Below that, you see the exchequer chamber as we define those where the debtors are kept who owe a debt to the king. All right, these are chambers. These places actually exist in what they call the Middle Ages. All right, I wasn't there, so I can't tell if we did or not. We just use this information to solidify what we're saying in the present day, because we can only apply these things from a mental capacity to our present conditions. All right, and thank our ancestors that we're not back in those days. All right, so as we can see below the House of Lords, i.e. those who govern you, whether they be Parliament or whether it be United States government and its officials, those below it are called the ones who keep watch, or the doorkeepers, which is called the exchequer chamber, who you go to, which is confined to what we call your local courts. As you can see on the left, these are your local courts. These are called your courts of common pleas. All right, they work for the king's bench. All right, as you can see. Let's go here. The Court of Exchequer Chamber was the English appellate court. What does it mean to appeal? To appeal means to request, to ask for, to appeal to somebody. In this case, you're appealing to your ancestors, which were kings and queens, to come to your rescue in regards to the state of hell that you're in. Because we already declared that the English nation, i.e. the English Temple Church, are in a state of emergency. We already declared that. And we're looking for the what we call the courts of chancery. The courts of chancery to come to the aid of the king's consciousness, which is the consciousness that I'm revealing to you in regards to the state of emergency that his subjects are subject to. Okay? Now, we didn't file this case in what we call the court of chancery. This case was filed in the courts of common pleas. But because of the subject matter in regards to the case that we filed in the court of common pleas, in regards to us being in hell, in regards to the doorkeepers who are governing under what we call the king's bench, presumed to be the king's bench, but they're not the king's bench. Why? Because they're not practicing under what we call the king's consciousness. There is no king, brothers and sisters. There is no consciousness of the kings and the realms governing the king. Why? Because there is no colonies. Because the colonies were governed by a monarch, i.e. the king. So in order for your rights as English people to be restored, we must go back to that state of mind of colonies, where you were the heirs and successors descended down from the king, i.e. the monarch, which kept the so-called plantation owners who set colonies here, who now became states, who now took over your estate because now they switched places with you. We're going to show you how this happened. Any enlightenment you brothers want to give before I go on?
And to go ahead and go along with the king has said, all of this is taking place after there was no longer a king. You know, there was no kings. There's no king's bench if there was no king. But the king has returned, which brings the king's bench back into full effect, which now puts everything else back in the order. And now we're just waiting for the people to be able to see it, that which the courts today are taking their steps to recognize.
Well said. Archbishop, CA?
And point of interest, I noticed on the chart, it said, as sets that nisi prius next to the court of common pleas, and nisi prius being Latin for assumed jurisdiction. So they're assuming jurisdiction over all commoners and common pleas by way of this this chart that we're looking at here.
Well said. It's all presumption and law, because common law and equity in law is two different things. You got law of equity, you got common law and the law of equity. The law of equity automatically falls under what we call the law of chancery.
Exactly.
And the only way that can apply to you is that you're reflected in the king's consciousness. And the king's consciousness is called conscientious law, which is called the natural law. I went through this, but let's, for the sake of time, let's just go over it real quick. Court of Chancery. How does it look on the screen? Is that viewable?
Yeah, that's viewable.
Okay. This is the Court of Chancery was a court of equity in England and Wales that followed a set of loose rules to avoid the slow pace of change and possible harshness of the inequity of the common law. Of the common law. What is common law? Common law is called jurisdiction, because jurisdiction means law declared. That's what jurisdiction means. Jurisdiction determines the venue. For these venues, the common courts of pleas or the common courts of exchequer are improper venues because you have not declared the proper law in lieu of jurisdiction. Because they're in inequity and a harshness to who you say you are as an Englishman or Englishwoman. So therefore, there's inequity. When you're dealing with your property, i.e. your children, there's an equity. Why? Because it's not heard in the court of chancery or probate. It's heard in the juvenile matter jurisdiction. And there's no neglect of the child. I think you're silent, CA. But the jurisdiction concerning your property, i.e. you being the guardian of that child, is not heard in a probate matter, proving of guardianship. It's heard in the juvenile court. That's a problem because they're heard in courts of common plea. And the common plea is to plead to the court's jurisdiction. So you at the mercy of the court. Ain't nobody coming to your rescue. Ain't no ancestors, no princes and kings coming to your rescue. Because you're not dealing with the law governing kings, monarchs, and princes, especially over here in this territory and the state. Because state means the same word as estate, and Latin means status, status. So status is determined by your state, which determines your estate. If you don't fix your status, then you can't fix your, you can't claim your estate. Why? Because it falls in what we call under the term esteated.
Point of interest, King.
Go ahead, Sierra.
Intergenerational wealth.
There you go. Look at that doomsday clock. Look at that doomsday clock, Archbishop.
And once again, this is to reiterate to all you so-called Americans, you are the debtors. And as long as you're a debtor, you're going to stay in hell. You know, there's only one way out, like we already verified from the other previous videos. But like the king says, until you get right, or your status get right, then your status is only going to be able to get right based off of your state of mind. If your state of mind is not clear, you can't declare who you are.
That's very important because remember, who are you? Are you property of the state, or are you property of the king? You got to choose one. You're property of the state or property of the king, because even the colonies were property of the king.
And silence.
That spook stuff you're talking about, that wasn't even in the, they put that there to relieve them of their obligation to the king. All right, let's move forward. The Court of Chancery was a court of equity in England and Wales that followed a set loose of rules to avoid the slow pace of change and the possible hardships of inequity of the common law. They tell you the common law is inequity. Why? Because it's based off made-up law, strategies, as they go along. All right? The Chancery had jurisdiction over all matters of equity, including trust, land law, the estates of lunatics, and the guardianship of infants. Its initial role was somewhat different as an extension of the Lord Chancellor role as keeper of the king's consciousness. The court was an administrative body primarily concerned with the conscientious law. The conscientious law is called natural law.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so if you claiming you're subject to natural law, you better understand that you better have a king. All right, let's go back here. All this fell apart under the Judiciary Act of 1873. This is called the Exchequer Chamber. Let's go back there real quick. It's the Exchequer Pleas. Show you the difference. Exchequer Pleas. The Exchequer Pleas, or the Court of Exchequer, was a court that deals with matters of equity, a set of legal principles based on natural law, i.e. conscientious law, i.e. the law of the king. In England and Wales, originally part of what we call the Career Regis, or a King's Council. The Exchequer of Pleas split from the Career in 1190 to sit in the independent central court. The Court of Chancery reputation for tardiness and expense resulted in much of the business transferring to the Exchequer. The Exchequer and Chancery with similar jurisdiction drew closer together over the years until an argument was made during the 19th century that have two seemingly identical courts was unnecessary. Let's go back to the Exchequer Chamber. The Court of Exchequer Chamber was an English appellate court for common law civil actions before the reform of the Judiciary Act of 1873 and 1875. It originated in the 14th century, established in its final form by the Statute of 1585. This during the reign of the Tudors. Mm-hmm. The court heard references from the King's Bench, the Court of Exchequer, and from 1830 directly, rather than indirectly, from the Courts of Common Pleas. It was constituted from 4 judges belonging to 2 courts that had been uninvolved at first instance. In cases of exceptional importance, such as the cases of Mine, 1568, and R versus Hampton, 1637. Now, this is at the time of what we call ship money. If you watch the video, this is called ship money. The taxing on colonies on English territory outside of the time of war. This is a violation of the Magna Carta, going back to our ancestors. Clear violation of it. We're going to show you. It says 12 common law judges, 4 from each division below, sitting in the exchequer chamber. Now we know that everything below that is hell. We just defined it in the Black Law Dictionary. Everything below the exchequer chamber is hell. It says sitting in the exchequer chamber might be asked to determine a point of law, the matter being referred by the court hearing the case rather than the parties. Though further appeals to the House of Lords was possible, this was rare before the 19th century. As a rule, a judgment of exchequer chamber was considered the definite statement of the law. Certain judges like Hampton, the case of ship money, caused political controversy. So the creation of taxation and the tax money caused a controversy between Parliament. Now we know we have 2 parliaments. We had the Parliament established by the House of Stuart and what we call the Commonwealth, which was a result of the English Civil War, the War of the 3 Kingdoms, and what we call the Bishop Wars. It was all a result of the secret treaty made with Charles I in 1634, which is a result of the petitioner rights in 1628, which result in the dissolving of Parliament in 1629. Listen, brothers and sisters, this is very important if you call yourself a teacher. All right? Now, I just said that, let's back it up, ship money. And how I know we know this because the origin of ship money came from our ancestors. I knew about this flag prior to me knowing about ship money. All right, let's see what ship money is. This is going to be narrated by Archbishop.
All right. Ship money. Ship money was a tax of medieval origin, levied intermittently in the Kingdom of England until the middle of the 17th century, assessed typically in inhabitants of coastal areas of England. It was one of the several taxes the English monarchs could levy by prerogative without the approval of Parliament.
Prerogative.
The attempt of King Charles I from 1634 onwards to levy ship money during peacetime and extend it to the inland counties of England without parliamentary approval provoked fierce resistance and was one of the grievances of the English property class in the lead, which led up to the English Civil War.
Okay, so we see ship money was a tax during the medieval time in the Kingdom of England through the reign of Charles I. Now they're dealing with territories over here in North America. Realize what we're talking about. These monarchs are dealing with territory here in North America, claiming the rule from the jurisdiction over there. All right. Now we're dealing with ship money, about taxes that Charles I considered to start claiming on the English, on the colonies. There were colonies at this time. There were no states.
Point of interest.
Go ahead, CA.
So we're dealing with ship money and the taxes, and it's causing a conflict between property rights and Parliament and people in England or Britain at this time, because the 17th century, are claiming jurisdiction over the assets and the affairs here in so-called modern day America. And this goes into the Boston Tea Party taxation without representation, etc.
Well said. A lot of things went down in Boston, Massachusetts, as a result of the Puritans, who were nothing more than Protestants and Anglicans who broke away from the Roman Catholic Church. And this is what descended down from the House of Stuart, because they were Roman Catholics. We're going to prove this. All right. So the traditional practice of ship money, i.e. taxation, origin goes back in the case of ship money started from the Plantagenet Kings of England. That's our house. All right. Only the king could know this. I'm the reincarnation of the founder of the Anjou and Plantagenet crown. I'm the Godfrey, the fifth count of Anjou, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem. I'm going to show you that because the origin of the word plant or planter, which the so-called founding fathers claim to be the original planters here in North America. No, they were not.
Mm-hmm.
They were not the original planters here in North America. We're going to prove it. So Plantagenet Kings of England had exercised the right of requiring the maritime towns and counties to furnish ships in a time of war, and this duty was sometimes committed for a money payment, i.e. free common surplus. Although several statutes of Edward I, these are the descendants of the Plantagenet crown, this is called the Angevin Kingdom crown, all right? Although several statutes of Edward I and Edward III, he's the father of John Gaunt. After this, the agnatic succession stopped.
Mm-hmm.
It stopped, all right? It said under Edward III, notably their confirmation of the Magna Carta had made it illegal for the crown to exact any tax without the consent of Parliament. We ain't talking about King James de facto Parliament. We're talking about the real Parliament. The House of Lords, not the House of Commons. The House of Lords, not the House of Commons. Listen, y'all, to exact any tax without the consent of Parliament, the prerogative, i.e. writ, of levying ship money in a time of war has never fallen wholly into abeyance. In 1619, James I aroused no popular opposition by levying 40,000 of ship money on London and 8,550 on other seaports in town. This is the first, assumed to be the first king of England and the sixth king of Scotland, who descended from the Church of Scotland, from the Kingdom of Scotland, who started from Kenneth MacAlpin, who was a German. They have nothing to do with the Kingdom of England. They were Germans, Palatine Germans. All right. Now, let me show you, as we know, the origin of taxation goes back to our ancestors. So the only person that can be collecting taxes is us.
Yep.
We got modern day statutes to support that. 46:3-2, -4, -5, -6, -10 of the New Jersey Revised Statute. It says that. So we ain't just saying, speaking out we're speaking truth, y'all. Y'all have to listen to us. If you don't, that's a problem. But we're speaking truth. Opposition to ship money. Parliament obeyed what the Magna Carta stated that was passed down by our ancestors, that you cannot tax money on the colonies without a time of war. This transferred over to what we call the restoration of the king under the Charles II, on down to what we call the House of Handover, through what we call the Supremacy Act of 1558. You brothers and sisters know what that is? No, I'm pretty sure you don't, because it originated from the Supremacy Act of 1538. 1558 and 1538. 1558 was the Supremacy Act of Queen Elizabeth I. The 1538 Act, or I think it was 1534, was of that of Henry VIII, when he declared himself the advisor of the Church of England.
Mm-hmm.
They did the same thing in 1558 with Queen Elizabeth I. We're going to show you. We ain't just speaking, we're showing you. So opposition in 1628, Charles I, having paroled Parliament in early summer and after his assent to petition of rights, proceeded to levy ship money on every county in England without Parliament, issuing writs requiring 173,000 to be returned to the Exchequer. This was the first occasion when the demand for ship money aroused serious opposition in view of the declaration and the petition for that. It says, your subjects have inherited this freedom, that they should not be compelled to contribute to any tax, tallage, aid, or other like charge not set by the common consent in Parliament. So they're upset that the House of Stuart is taxing them when the original rights that they got, which was actually belonged to us, said you couldn't do so. But you have to remember, they're not the heirs and successors.
Mm-hmm.
We are. We're not supposed to be paying taxes, but somehow we fell victim to the scheme. We're going to uncover this truth. All right. Any remarks before I move on?
And that was our 30 minutes.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna close out with this 30-minute video, and we're gonna meet you back here shortly in a couple minutes to start with part 5.